Somos Viña.
We are Vineyard.
I have regularly asked an entire room filled of business leaders, what's the most dysfunctional organization you can think of? It's almost like a choir back to me. The church, which is so embarrassing, Jay. So embarrassing. It's not even a hesitation. It's the reputation is there. And my experience behind the scenes with leaders only validates it.
Yeah.
What's the difference? One difference is not the fault of any of the church leaders I've worked with. What's different is the church has a spiritual enemy no company I work with has. There's a different enemy. And so I think I can't ignore that reality. Why is it that human beings in one context, all human, the same humans with a lot of the same sin, a lot of the same dysfunction, but why is this so hard? When I know when you talk to them one-on-one, even the craziest leaders I've worked with, like you, I'm just kidding. The craziest leaders, like I meet with them one-on-one and I'm like, no, they're sincere. They love the Lord. Yeah. They really do love the gospel. Why is this so hard? Well, there's a spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be acknowledged. It's just part of the reason it's different is because the battle's different.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, Jay Pathak, National Director for Vineyard USA, will be interviewing Chris Jensen, a principal consultant at the Table Group. Let's listen in.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me. We Are Vineyard. And where are you presently? Where are you sitting?
Presently, I am sitting in Naples, Florida, but my home is in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, I didn't know that. You're in Naples right now.
I am in Naples.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Cool. Well, thanks for making time to join us on the road. And we'll hear all about different ways you've been helping and connecting us in the Vineyard. But let's start a little bit with just a little bit about you. Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
I was born in Oakland, California, which is where I grew up, which is in the Bay Area for people who may not know.
Mm-hmm.
And then my family moved to Alameda right before my teenage years.
Okay.
That's where I grew up, and it's where I ultimately met the young lady who would become my wife. Yeah, Oakland, California, Bay Area, born and raised.
Okay.
One church.
One church your whole time growing up?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, okay. And
it merged and moved.
Sure. But one church. And does that feel like home? Like when you go back there, you like, this is home?
It did, but not anymore. You know, the Bay Area has changed quite a bit. I think everybody in the United States would know about the dynamics in California over the last few years. So Oakland in the 80s is different than post Silicon Valley, post all the other things that have been happening over the last several years. So
totally,
it's a very different place. My family had moved back in 2020 to the Bay Area for various reasons. And while we were there, my wife and I said, this is not the same place we grew up in. And ultimately we had to move back to Portland and decided Portland's home now. So now we're Portlanders.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's quite a bit different than there, but you said you grew up in one church. So like, was church like a big part of your family life, or was it just a big part of your life, or was it positive thing, negative thing?
Yeah. Growing up, I would say church was, when you're a kid, church is, I don't think you think positive and negative. Knowing what I know now, it was very negative, but growing up, it was family to me. Right. So I grew up in a very small Pentecostal church in Oakland, California, altar calls every service, service Sunday morning, service Sunday night, potluck in the middle at somebody's house. It was incredible. You were always at grandma so-and-so's house for the prayer meeting and the Bible study, and nobody lived their faith in between those services. You just made sure you were at the altar call and you were at church on Sunday.
Yep.
That was church in the inner city back back then. Maybe there's still a lot of churches like that kind of old school Pentecostal type church, but it was my family. I love those people. I can still remember the families that we would have meals with, and I only have great memories of that. I kind of miss church being like that, to be honest, Jay. I miss going to church and then going over to somebody's house, and we all had to bring something, and we just hung out at the house, had a meal together, and then went back to church again. You know, I've learned later now as an adult, a tremendous amount of sin and dysfunction going on. That's why it doesn't exist now. But as a child growing up, these were my friends, these were my family, these were my parents' friends. I know it was impactful to my parents as they were going through quite a hard time. And so those were people who became a family to my parents at an important time. So I know it was good for them in that.
And what kind of, so like you're obviously in church a lot. Were you like a geeky kid? Were you like a sports kid? Were you like
I was the musician turned punk rock.
Oh,
so
nice.
So, and by the way, I really, some people have that dramatic transformation in their faith. Like I got saved and this was the day I got saved.
Right.
I really genuinely am one of those people who I don't remember not being in faith. So I say that to say, and I was always into music. Always, as young as I can remember, I was playing some instrument. I played guitar, trumpet, cello, viola, piano, saxophone. I mean, all kinds of instruments. And then when I, junior high, wanted to grow my hair out long, go hardcore as we said back then. Yeah. Punk rock, got the piercings and everything. My band was a Christian, I'm using air quotes here, punk rock band. We would preach the gospel at our shows. We would all around the Bay Area, we play shows but music was my thing. Sports, not so much.
Huh. That's cool. Okay. And so did that translate in? So it translated into church music, apparently, because you had a Christian band, in theory.
Yeah, and that was accidental. I played in a punk band, which is hardly music. I'll say that. And my pastor had asked me at one point if I would lead worship for maybe it was a youth event or something. And, I was on the worship team. I had been on the worship team. I was the kid with the blue hair up and the piercings playing guitar.
I love this, man. I want to see photos. I really do.
Nobody took pictures of me a lot back then.
I really doubt that. Yeah. Okay.
So, it was back then, these days, I think that's much more accepted. Back then, a lot of people had a hard time with me being on stage, and, things didn't go tremendously well between me and that pastor later in life. But I will say one of the things that he did was he definitely opened that door and allowed me to be on stage, had my back and vouched for my faith. And I ended up leading worship once, and it went great. I ended up becoming a worship leader, which was never in my, it was never in my direction.
Right.
But yeah, music did translate into that. That ended up being a big part of when I did go eventually into ministry, it became a big part of that.
Yeah. So talk about that. So as you're graduating high school, you got this music vibe. Are you then like, oh, ministry is the way for me. I'm going to be a pastor. Was that sort of like the trajectory, or were you like,
By the way, I don't think you even knew any of this about me, huh? You and I are having a actual legitimate real conversation right now.
There's pieces of this I knew, but yeah, we are also having a real conversation. Yes. I knew pieces, but it's coming together. So, and by the way, every single time I do this, I've done interviews with people I've known 20 years. It's like, oh wow, I never. Yeah, you always do, right? I mean, when you engage people's stories with real intention, you always pick up stuff.
So you're asking me about kind of transition in ministry?
Well, or maybe not. Maybe as you got done with high school, were you thinking, I'm going to go be a business person or a lawyer or a doctor? Or were you like,
Okay, so
no, I'm going to
total
be,
accidental.
yeah.
No, total accidental. How I ended up in ministry was completely accidental. I was leaving high school prepared to go into the music industry. I wanted to get
Okay.
into music production.
Yep.
So I was a kid. I had a little mixer back in the day when you had those little mixers,
Yeah.
and we didn't really have computers back then. It was all just a different era. But I love that. I love being in the studio. I loved recording music. I loved producing, mixing. I loved all of that. And so that was the direction I was going. And my pastor at the time and my parents both thought, he should go to Bible school for 1 year. And so I told him, totally. I loved being a witness to the gospel. I loved the Lord. So to me, I thought, yeah, that's great. I easily do that. And there was a Bible school in Portland that my pastor and the pastor of that church had, it was a season where they had been connected. And so, in fact, we never were really connected again after that. So it was kind of a miraculous moment that got me to go to Portland, Oregon, to go to this little Bible school up on a hill up there. And it kind of radically transformed. I grew up in small churches, had never seen, quote, mega church.
Right.
I mean, back in the 80s, I don't even know where mega churches really were. Was that a thing back then?
Not many. Yeah, right.
And so then I went to this church. I walked in and it was huge. I'd never seen thousands of people gather to worship. I just never seen that before. And I remember I went to their first youth night, which they had this kind of thing where they called it Generation Ministries, where they had junior high through college all together in one thing. And it was like several hundred kids. And I just remember that night, that first night, I watched about a dozen kids rush up to the pastor, the youth pastor, lay hands on him before he preached and started praying for him, just ad hoc. And I was shocked. I did not grow up to youth ministry. The youth ministry I grew up in, everybody was sleeping around and dealing drugs. And I'm not joking. This is what I'm saying. I learned this was all bad afterwards.
I believe you.
I was a believer. I love my friends. I think they kind of had faith, but the truth was there was a lot of just, it actually was pretty dark, much darker than I'm even saying now. But I really I never imagined other young people so on fire for the Lord. And in that moment, I felt impressed by the Holy Spirit. I want you to do this and give up music. And so that's what I did. I embedded myself in that particular ministry and learned about it. And then ultimately did go into ministry.
Yeah.
But I told my parents that I felt called to that. And my dad said, I feel like you should get a backup in case ministry doesn't work out, a backup degree, like get some other degree.
Sure.
And I'll never forget, I told my dad, I was like, Dad, if the Lord calls me, I don't need a backup. And I think it was like a week after I was out of ministry where I was like, dang, I wish I had a backup degree.
He was right. Exactly. Yeah.
I should have had a backup degree, although the Lord did totally take care of me. So I didn't
apparently, yeah, we're here now. So
yeah, we're here now.
So talk about that. So you talk about your transition in ministry and then what led you to be like, man, I got to do something else. What were the moves?
Yeah, it was also, I think the story of my life will be everything happened on accident. So
that's good.
So I was in ministry. First of all, I loved our church. I loved, again, these are people, I never left a church. So our church had merged, had moved out to the suburbs, and these are people I loved. We had merged with this great other church where the new pastor, he was the one who got me into being a worship leader, sent me to school. And I felt he was like a great mentor to me when I was at that phase and excited to go into ministry. And in that season, there was a lot of challenges. Two things happened. One, I had went on a prayer walk like I did often. And I remember praying and telling the Lord, nothing about my ministry life felt at all like the people I read about in the Bible. I was like, I'm reading like Abraham, get up and leave your family and go somewhere I'll show you, or Moses, and all these great men of God in scripture. And I just think like, man, every Monday have the same staff meeting. I have the same coffee appointments. I have the same Bible study, the same this meeting, the same that meeting, the same worship practice. We got the same songs. I got the same rhythm of what my song rotation is, so everybody can learn the song, and then we can finally integrate it as like a formal song. And I was like, none of this feels like faith. It feels too routine. And I said, Lord, I just want my life. I want to be able to tell my kids that I'm a man of faith, that I actually had to lean on you. Well, that is a bad prayer.
Yeah.
Don't pray that.
Yeah.
Also at that time, I had become introduced to Patrick Lencioni, who I now work with. And this was, probably about a little over 20 years ago, and no intention of ever being apart, but I had met him. I had began to apply the materials in our church, which was great. And somewhere along the lines, it created, there just became a friction between me and our senior pastor. And I would say to this day, I don't actually know what the motives were. What I do know is one day I came home from an anniversary trip, and a friend of mine at the time said, hey, while you were gone, our pastor, who will remain unnamed, was asking all of us how much money it would take to get me to quit. And I was like blindsided by that.
What? Yeah, right.
Yeah, this was a guy considered to be like spiritual father. I knew there was frictions, but in my naivety, like we were not talking to each other. Like his shades would be closing his door if I was in the office. It was pretty bad. But my naivety, I thought, yeah, but we're believers. We're going to reconcile at some point. Like that's what believers do. We're ministers of reconciliation. So yeah, we're having a hard time. Marriages have hard times. I thought we'll get back together. This will all be great.
Yeah.
And it didn't, and very quickly unraveled and got very bad. And for the first time in my entire life, I found myself without a church.
Yeah.
And having lost most of the people who were family to me, a good chunk of them outright lied about us, for sure left us, said they weren't going to talk to us again.
Wow.
But Jay, I'll tell you, to this day, like nothing happened. Like I wish I could say, oh, I was doing this and he was doing that. And but it was one of those things that it was just dysfunctional.
Yep.
A lot of people who just didn't know other ways of dealing with it. The easiest thing was Chris just needs to get out.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was painful. It sucked. And I found myself thinking I was going to be getting a year severance and then being told I was only going to get a couple of weeks severance. And then finding out a week or two after that my wife was pregnant with our third baby.
Oof.
And it was like everything went from same coffee, same meetings, same staff meetings, same church service, same this, same that, to like none of it.
Wow.
Overnight. It was one of those dark moments in particularly my wife and I together, but it was one of those dark moments in life. So everything changed.
Well, and it sounds like at the very least, though you might not have a clear explanation, at the very least, your prayers were answered. you were no longer in sort of a, you your desperate prayer to be a man of faith was quickly answered.
And I will tell you, I was not thinking that at all.
Yeah.
Probably for several years through that transition, I went straight into survival mode. It was painful. I'll be honest, I've still struggle with forgiveness. I just watched the other day the Charlie Kirk Memorial, and his wife, I kind of was thinking, she might say this. And when she said it, I was so convicted in myself, because I look back on that season and I have a lot of resentment towards a lot of folks back there who, some of those elders, one in particular, I remember looking him in the eye in a reconciliation meeting, eye to eye, saying, this is not true.
Yeah.
Are you going to do anything about it, in front of the whole team? Yeah. And I'm thinking, we're like, this is what we do. And he put his head down, and the senior pastor was like, we're not talking about this. And none of those guys stood up. None of them said anything. And I just remember it was like the first time in my life I saw dysfunction, and I could not believe it, Jay. I now I'm, I've seen it a million times over, but at the time I thought, wow, I didn't know people do this. Yeah. I didn't know they betray you like that. I didn't know they don't do the right thing.
Yeah.
I literally, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And yet it was happening to me.
Yeah. And then do you move toward more ministry thoughts? Like, well, I don't know, maybe there's a church I can work at, or are you like, nah? No,
first thought was, because I only have a Bible degree. I didn't have a backup degree. So I was also, this is kind of the irony of these things. I was a little bit, in my youthful arrogance, like, I'm not a professional minister. Like, I'm part of this family. I don't go apply for ministry jobs, using air quotes again.
Right.
Like, it's not my job. This is my calling, and this is my family. And so then I immediately was like, I need a job, and I only have church skills. So I called every church in the area.
Yeah.
Like, hey, do you need anything? And I did have a couple interviews, and it's ironic too in that season, Jay. I don't know if irony is the right word, but there was a church we used to judge. They were the big church in our town. Mm-hmm. And we used to say, they focus on attraction, we focus on discipleship. That's why they're so big and we're so small.
Yep.
And the pastor of that church, one of the pastors, not the senior pastor, but one of the founding pastors, his right-hand guy, I don't know how he got my number, called me out of the blue, said, hey, Chris, he met me for coffee. And he said, I just heard what happened, and I just wanted to talk to you and just be there for you. You got to feel so alone right now.
Wow.
And I just got goosebumps thinking of it. I didn't talk to him for maybe 15 years later. It was like a miraculous godsend. I tried to get a ministry job. Oh, by the way, this was like right when the recession was starting to happen in the early 2000s. So it wasn't just that I couldn't get a ministry job. It very quickly became nobody was hiring.
Right.
And so that's, ultimately that whole situation is how I ended up back in Portland from Bible school. Was I just started calling everybody I knew, called the church in Portland that I had known. Some of those guys said, at the time, absolutely get up here. We'll get you a job. And went up there. When I went up there, they were like, actually, we're firing everybody. We don't have jobs.
Oh gosh.
And then there was a small little San Francisco startup that was hiring in Portland. And I called Pat Lencioni and asked for advice. I was like, hey, you know me, I've never applied for a job before. Here's this company. It seems kind of weird. Can I get your advice? And he's like, actually, I know the founders. My kids were part of their former company. This is probably a great company for you just to get in, get out of ministry, be part of a growing tech company, a little startup company. And he's like, if they're successful, you get to be on the early stages of something that grows. And he was right. It was great, but it was like a radical shift from ministry to secular Portland, San Francisco tech.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a radical culture shift for me. And I'm so thankful for it, actually, in retrospect. But yeah, that's how I got out and into business.
So when you describe the radical shift, like if you could bullet point that, like what were the things like you were like, whoa, was it just pace? Was it ruthlessness? Was it what were the things that
what was different between the two?
Yeah. What was the radical shift? You said it was just a total radical shift.
Well, culture. It was like, hey, we're all going out to the bar after work today. And I was like, our church was not the type of church to do that,
Right.
I know your church, Jay, is. No, I'm just kidding. I actually don't know.
You're not far off. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Our church was just the kind that, like, apparently everybody slept around, but nobody drank. Okay, so everybody embezzled money.
I shouldn't laugh. That's
nobody.
Not funny.
Nobody cussed and drank, but they slept around and stole money from the church. That's what they apparently did. Which I learned all later. Anyways,
mercy.
Yeah, I would say the biggest difference was more just being around non-believers and them doing normal things that were just not part of my Christian church culture.
Right.
And so being around people for the first time who had different lifestyles than me, different values than me, just different habits. They just lived differently. They just made their life was just different.
Right.
And also the nicest people.
Right.
And I just found myself having conversations with people that I just really, became real friends with, who were totally different lifestyles than me. And I'll never forget my first boss there. I remember going to meet with a client and he said, hey, when we get there, we're going to need to kind of share a little bit of our bios. And I was like, what do I say? I came from ministry. He's like, tell them the truth. And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to. And he was like, Chris, you came from ministry. Why would you lie? He was like, why would you lie? This is a guy who's like total secular, non-believing. Yes. He was like, why would you lie? And I was like, okay, that's a great question to ask a former pastor.
Right.
And it was liberating. I felt for the first time not afraid to talk about my faith with people. It was odd growing up the way I had, living in that bubble. I didn't know what to say to believers or unbelievers.
Right.
And then I found myself having conversations with people. And I remember one of my first lunches, one of my managers said, so you're a former pastor. I was worried about you coming on board. She says, so do you think I'm going to hell because I'm a lesbian?
Woof.
And I was like, okay, like immediately I felt the Holy Spirit. And it was one of those moments where I was like, wow, my answer is really important right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that became kind of that whole season for me was me becoming comfortable in my own skin as a believer with unbelievers who were more comfortable talking openly with me and having conversations. I feel like I wish that we could go back to some of those days culturally.
Right.
That seems like now, I think actually that woman now would not talk to me from some of the things that I've seen online. Right. But back in those days, we just had super open conversations.
Yep.
And that's more what I mean by the jarring disconnect. It was
yeah.
And for my wife and I, that was really hard because she's used to going to work with me and knowing everybody I work with. For the first time,
right.
I'm going to work with unbelievers and like, oh, I'm going out with them after and we're going to a bar. And like, we hadn't really ever, I was a bad communicator. So I'm like, oh, I probably should have asked you. We probably should have talked. Is this something we do?
Right.
Like, do I go to bars now? Is that a thing? Like, is that okay?
Right. Yeah. We should have negotiated this. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. The culture, in that environment, it was normal for a man and a woman to just go have lunch together, like a business
Totally.
lunch.
Right.
In the ministry, it was like, you
Yeah.
never do that.
Right.
And so there was a lot of things that that were just new.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. So you're in the startup. It does pretty well. Now you're in the business world. What leads you into the work with Patrick and all that? Does that happen naturally, or does it kind of?
No, that's also accidental. So
Perfect.
so what happened was when I did get the job, and once I got the lay of the land, I told my friends back at the Table Group, which is the company that Pat founded.
Mm-hmm.
And so I become friends with them, and I told them, I said, hey, so this company is very team centric. The way they're structured requires teams. So I remember saying, I'm going to use this as a testing ground because I was in ministry trying to apply this. And I said, now I'm in a strictly business results environment. I said, I don't know anything except for your stuff. So I'm just going to use your stuff and see. I said, my team is measured against every other team. And so I said, this will be kind of a fun experiment to see how well does my team perform by just focusing on, can I build an effective leadership team? Can I create a simple, clear playbook for my team? Can I put these things to practice? And I did. I just relentlessly only did those things that Pat wrote about at the time. And my team was the highest performing team in the company. My team, by every productivity metric, worked harder than every other team in the company. By every employee engagement survey, and this is all foreign. We didn't do this in ministry. So this is like the first time I'm experiencing these things. Like my employee engagement scores, my team was happier than every other team in the company. They're working harder and happier. I had the least turnover. In fact, the only reason I had people leave my team is because the company kept picking my team to go lead every new team. Every time we had a new client that had a new launch, they would pick somebody from my team to go lead that team because they're like, well, let's get Chris's people because his people know how to lead teams that deliver results.
Right.
So it was great. So I did that, progressed very quickly in the company. Pat was totally right. I got in very early and was able to grow with that company as they grew. And they went through a lot of different strategic shifts. And I got to be part of some of those early phases of that. But my wife and I were not happy with Portland. We didn't really want to be in Portland. And after a few years, we decided, okay, let's start looking for something back in California. And out of the blue, a friend of ours called us and said, hey, are you at all interested in moving back to California? And I was like, actually, yeah, we just talked about this. And he said his friend who worked for 24 Hour Fitness corporate, which was based in our hometown in the Bay Area, is actually looking for somebody to be in a kind of a senior operations role for California. And I was like, yes. And so went through several interviews, very excited about that. At the time, 24 Hour Fitness was going through a cultural shift. That was one of the things they were excited about having me come on board is they said, we need people who understand what we're about. We've got the wrong reputation. We need to transform it. And so you seem to have an ability to focus on culture and drive results. And so they were excited about that. Well, at the very last second before I accepted the role, I called up Pat and the team and went to the office to get advice on the role. And Jeff Gibson, who was our president of consulting, he said, when I was talking to them, he's like, you should just join our team, be a consultant. And I was like, I do not want to be a consultant. I was like, I did not. I had met one of their consultants and I loved him to death. He encouraged me to go try it. And I did. And it felt so lonely. I hated being alone. I had I went and worked with this little team and did a little 5 dysfunctions of a team. That's one of our books. And I did a little session on that. And they loved it. They had this breakthrough. And then I got in my car and was all by myself and realized like they're having a moment and I'm going
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And I had nobody to tell. And so I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be kind of a lone guy wandering around. And he was like, well, we're trying to change. At the time, the table group was going through a transformation with the consulting practice. And he said, we're going to start shifting more towards, they had been very independent. They were moving towards being more of team-like. And he said, think about it, pray about it. And then he said the thing that that really got me. He said, oh, and you could really help us because the table group had been doing a lot with the Willow Creek Association at the time. And he said, we've got a lot of churches calling us. We're not really set up to help churches, but you could really help us with some churches because I know you've got the church background. Well, he didn't know that several months before that, I was on a run and I was just so frustrated with my experience with church leadership that because of what happened to me in California, and then some other things happened after that were not as big, but just annoying more than anything. And I remember being on my run in tears, being so frustrated and disheartened by the church, disillusioned maybe is a better word. And I remember telling the Lord, I'm going to stop and pause my relationship with the church. I was like, I love you. I am really unclear about my relationship with the church right now. And so I need to stop. However, I will obey you. When you make it clear to me how I'm supposed to re-engage, I will run through that door. And I remember when Jeff said you could help us with churches, it was like the Holy Spirit prompt, this is my open door, run through it and help with where things are broken.
Wow.
And that was my entrance into the table group. So that's how I ended up here and then ended up rejecting the job. And then also Pat called me up and said, Chris, we're super excited to have you on board. However, you could ramp up faster if you stayed in Portland rather than move I know you were trying to move to California. So would you stay there? And then after your business gets ramped up, then maybe you can move. And so we stayed.
Wow. Okay. So now you've had bad experience, frustrated. Now I'm in this consulting role. I'm going to help church. Obviously that's how you and I cross paths. I'm like chasing around table group people and every person is, you got to talk to Chris. I think Chris would be able to help. And what did you find that translated and didn't translate out of the work of like helping to build teams, helping to create a healthy culture, to have a clear playbook? What were the things that you were like, as you started in with churches, were like, wait a minute, this is harder than I thought? What was like, what was one-to-one? What didn't quite translate the same way?
Compared to like working with executive teams?
Yeah.
In companies?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know, but I would say probably in our team, I've worked with more churches than anybody in our team is probably what I would say. Around the world, by the way, like churches in other countries, every denomination, no denomination is good as the Vineyard, by the way.
Of course.
Course, like obviously the Vineyard is the best, the healthiest, the best denomination I've ever engaged with.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah.
I say that to say I've got a lot of experience. I will go into I'm in Florida right now because I'm giving a keynote speech at a conference here. I have regularly at these conferences asked an entire room filled of business leaders, what's the most dysfunctional organization you can think of? It's almost like a choir back to me. The church. Which is so embarrassing, Jay. So embarrassing.
That's shocking.
It's not even a hesitation. It's the reputation is there. And my experience behind the scenes with leaders only validates it.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Well, one difference is not the fault of any of the church leaders I've worked with. And that is that, and I'm thinking, the audience of this podcast is probably a lot of pastors and ministers and people in ministry. What's different is the church has a spiritual enemy no company I work with has. There's
Wow.
a different enemy. And so I think I can't ignore that reality. Why is it that human beings in one context, all human, the same humans with a lot of the same sin, a lot of the same dysfunction, but why does this one feel like uniquely hard? Why is it like unity seems, why can this group rally around selling this product faster than these people rally around make sure people don't die and go to hell for all of eternity? Why is this so hard when I know when you talk to them one-on-one, even the craziest leaders I've worked with, like you, I'm just kidding. The craziest leaders, like I meet with them one-on-one and I'm like, no, they're sincere. They love the Lord.
Yeah.
They really do love the gospel. Why is this so hard? Well, there's a spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be acknowledged. It's just part of the reason it's different is because the battle's different. It's not market competition like, like some of the companies we work with. This is a spiritual warfare. It's war. So that's not a game. That's different. And the fight is not flesh and blood. It is principalities. And so a leader like you, what's always in my mind is this is not only organizational. It's not only, Jay needs to learn some leadership and management tips and tricks. It's also, there is also a spiritual enemy seeking to divide those who would work with you, keep you alone. And so I would say that's probably the biggest difference because, do I not like to see the egos in the church? Yes. I would say like I've seen some pretty bad sexual offenses in the church, but guess what? I see them also in the corporate. It's just they don't think of them as bad.
Right.
I see the same financial impropriety on both sides. I see all of that. I will say on the church side, the second biggest factor, and I'll just leave it at these two, is there's a lot of artificial harmony. And I see a lot of people in the church leadership teams or church staff being nice to each other at the expense of being honest. And so while things are falling apart like a house fire around them, everybody's patting each other on the back. That was a great sermon. That was a great class you taught. That was a great Bible study. Isn't God good? And it's like all around us, everything is falling apart. And it's like, you just want everybody can we just be honest? It's not judging each other. Can we just say, this isn't working? People are leaving. People are not becoming disciples. What are we doing that's wrong? And let's fix it. But people will just pat each other on the back and then they'll gossip in the parking lot and complain about pastor so-and-so and, this leader and that leader. But then you put them all in a room together and they all just play nice.
Yeah. And so your job is to make them not be nice, like make them be honest, break up the...
Yeah, I would say with churches, my experience is, and I think you've experienced this with me, is my job is to say what other people are just not saying. And I don't always want to say it. I mean, I've been in the room with you several times where I've thought, I don't want to say this. Come on, will somebody say this? And so that's the role I play, is let me just say it. And I think to myself, maybe I'm wrong, so I'll be open to being wrong, but I'm just going to say what I'm thinking. If it doesn't seem healthy, or if it doesn't seem like it's working, or if somebody looks like they're failing, or if somebody looks like they're struggling, I'm just going to say it. And then we'll go from there.
Vineyard Vineyard USA's Day of Giving is coming up on Giving Tuesday, December 2nd. How old were you when you discovered a life with Jesus? Research reveals that most people in the U.S. who commit their lives to Christ do so during their childhood or teenage years. In the Vineyard in 2024, we celebrated 50 years of God's faithfulness, 50 years of Come Holy Spirit, 50 years of Everyone Gets to Play. And this year at Vineyard USA, we're looking ahead to the next 50 years, asking, what if everything that we've done in the Vineyard so far is so we can give it away to the next generation? We want to invest together in our kids, our teens, and our young adults who will carry this family of churches into the next 50 years and beyond. Every gift will make a difference. Please pray and consider how you can give towards our Day of Giving on December 2nd. You can find more information at vineyardusa.org. Thank you.
Yeah, and so much, and if people aren't familiar with the Table Group and Lynn Shoney's work and the work you do, it's a must read, I think, for leaders really at any level, like whatever you're doing. So the information's helpful, but all information is only as useful as you can apply it. And some of what you're describing of like specifically churches breaking up, you call it false harmony or
artificial harmony.
Artificial harmony. So a lot of the focus of what you do is trying to get teams to function more effectively, right? So talk a little bit about what you're walking into a room. So let's say you walk into any pastor's team. So you look at elders, you look at a team. What are you watching for? What are the kind of key markers? You just identified one where it goes wrong, but maybe in the positive or the negative. What are you watching for? You walk in a room and you're watching how people interact. You're watching what they talk about. What are you looking for that is either a green light or a red light for you?
So the team cohesion that's the first thing I'm looking for. And I'll break that down. Although if any of your people are familiar with the 5 Dysfunctions of the Team book, that is the book that describes the things I'm looking for, which is, is there a foundation of trust that is demonstrated by the presence of vulnerability? Meaning, do I experience people admitting mistakes, asking for help, willing to disclose where they're struggling? Do I see them overcoming artificial harmony and engaging in real, honest conversations, even if it risks creating some conflict? Do I see team members letting go of disagreement when decisions are made? When the pastor or somebody in the team says, okay, I think let's make this decision. Does everybody do they actually commit to that? Or do they agree to disagree, which is the enemy of teamwork? Do team members hold one another accountable when they fall short? Or are they focused on their own area more than the church's outcome? And I think probably that's where a lot of teams struggle is they focus on their own area. One pastor I worked with, also in Florida here, amazing church. I mean, it's an amazing church. The pastor told me when I knew it clicked, Chris, when my team genuinely, when they talked about their team, and I'm using air quotes, they were actually referring to us, not their department.
Yeah.
He's like, when I heard my worship leader say my team to somebody, and he was referring to us and not the worship team. When my youth pastor said my team, and she was talking about us and not the youth ministry. He's like, it clicked, like they see the leadership of the church as their first team.
Yeah. And
so those are the things I'm looking for. Are these departmental representatives or are these co-leaders of the ministry with the pastor? And then the other thing I'm looking for is the leader. Is this leader a team leader? And one of the things that happens a lot with churches is the pastor is really more of like a public figure than a team leader. And some of them would prefer to hire somebody. I think this is where this weird executive pastor role came in, where it's like, I'll go do all the fun, preachy public stuff. And then you do all the hard stuff, like manage the staff, manage the team. And then you and I will kind of connect. I'll be the vision, quote, visionary voice. And then you'll do the manager stuff. And that is what I would call lazy leader. If you're the leader, you got to lead the team.
Yep.
And that means you have to do some management. You have to do some coaching. And maybe that's not your strength, so you better get better at it. But that's part of your duty and responsibility. Otherwise, you're abdicating your responsibility. And I would say pastors are the only ones who do that. No CEO I work with is like, hey, I'm just going to go on the public speaking circuit and you guys run the business. The board will fire them first quarter. Pastors can get away with it because you sounded good on stage. So you must be a great leader.
Yes. That's good. Okay. So those are clear observations, ones that I agree with. So there's nothing you're saying that I haven't experienced in myself or in even working with pastors and leaders. So besides obviously taking on the work of understanding what the table group does. So I'm always recommending the Advantage. I always find the Advantage to be the most kind of comprehensive, like just work your way through these categories and just watch what happens to you, even as a leader. Do you find yourself becoming defensive or even kind of wanting to argue with the book? Like, we don't know. That's not how that, okay, well, any place you want to argue, just notice that. Like, well, wonder what that's about. Why am I arguing with experts as to like what makes for healthy teams? So besides like doing, the work of information and learning, when you have a pastor come to you who says, yeah, I don't know, we don't have the trust, we don't have efficiency, or I don't know if we're as vulnerable as we need to be. What are some like initial ways that you start pushing them to lead more effectively?
Well, I think the education piece is an important one. This is why we have like a team assessment, which is super tactical, technical answer, but it does help pastors start a conversation. And that's what that assessment's for. That assessment takes less than 10 minutes for everybody to do. And what it does is it puts on the table a conversation with the leadership team to say, in these 5 essential areas, how are we doing? And what are some of the underlying reasons why some of those areas are not as doing, like simple things like, do team members point out one another's behaviors that hold the team back? Yeah, we almost never do that. Well, okay, so let's just talk about why we don't do that. And so I think the first thing is teams need to have awareness around what's the difference between what a great team does and what we do. And they need to have that awareness around that. And so something simple like you don't have to take that team assessment, by the way, but some version of let's talk about these behaviors and how we're doing and try to understand what we could do better. That's a very practical and easy starting point that just is objective and simple for everybody. You mentioned the Advantage, which is great. The 5 Dysfunction of a Team is probably our most well-known book. It's a fable format, not a guide like the Advantage you described. And most leaders, when they have their teams read that book, would say it also facilitates a great discussion because everybody can start to see themselves in each other in the characters. It's one of Pat's strengths is writing those narratives. And so those are great starting points. And a lot of teams we say, then when you're serious, you probably need to do some kind of an offsite to really get out of the day-to-day work. So you have enough time. You need to do an offsite because you need time to actually talk through some of this stuff. You can't do it in your normal busy schedule. You can't fit we don't trust each other in a 45-minute meeting.
Right.
When you then have to go to a finance meeting and then a counseling meeting and then this meeting and that meeting. So an offsite is just schedule 1 day or 2 days, get offsite somewhere together and just talk about how are we doing as a team? What can we do? And have a very light agenda and just start making decisions on, let's pick 1, maybe 2 things that we could do better and do that. And then make that a habit. Every 3 months, we'll go offsite. We'll keep doing it. So
it's good. It's good. Well, you have been invaluable to me personally and to our Vineyard team as we built a team, as we've sort of reorged into this whole new world of leading the Vineyard. Just as a way of sort of landing the plane, like, why did you agree to help us at all, Chris? Like you got all kinds of important people who call you and
Mhm.
I mean, maybe it was just I harassed you sufficiently enough times. But what made you go, yeah, this is the kind of group I want to help?
So when I first started the table group, remember Jeff said, "What's your business development strategy?" And I said, "Well, I feel like what the Lord asked me to do is say yes to every pastor who calls me
Hmm.
and help them for free, and he'll build my business." And then Jeff was like, "Oh, so you don't want to make any money?" And I was like, I don't even know what making money means. I'm a former minister.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I was barely in a tech startup, which also didn't have a lot of money. So,
Right.
so one, my attitude and disposition when you reached out was inclined to help. I do want to say this though about you specifically is the church faith I grew up in. I'd always heard of the Vineyard.
Hmm.
You know, the church I went to in Portland came out of the Jesus movement, and
Hmm.
so I had heard about the Vineyard in very like admired terms. I mean, the reputation of your movement was, I mean, it was global, but it was also personal to me. It was very involved in my journey of faith. And so when I got the call, I got it. And when I talked to you, what I was realizing was I hadn't heard of you guys in a while. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
do know what you
it
mean.
occurred to me as we talked, oh yeah, I remember thinking, what happened to the Vineyard?
Yeah.
And I didn't have a judgment about that. I just was realizing like, oh, I just, hadn't heard.
Right.
And as you and I began to talk about kind of the story of where the Vineyard was, where you were at, what was happening, I wanted to help you with the Vineyard in this new season. I loved this ministry. I think you were telling me somebody had told you, the world needs the Vineyard, some version of that. You told me that
Yeah.
before this podcast. And when you
Yeah.
told me that, I was thinking, that's exactly how I feel as well. There is you guys have carried a particular mantle, a particular voice that has been so important. I think it needs to continue to grow. The reality is as with anything, if it's not healthy, even great things can diminish. And so I really love being a part of how can I help the Vineyard be healthy? Because, I mean, sticking to the same analogy, a vineyard that is not healthy can't thrive, can't grow.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means pruning, sometimes that means retrenching some things and having some difficult conversations. But I want to help be part of even this small part of seeing that fruit. That's the point of being healthy, is more fruit. He's the source. If we're not healthy, then then it's a sheer miracle for anything. And so the best I can do is help you steward this legacy. And it's an honor to be a part of something like this. So thank you for letting me be a part.
No, man. No, I'm beyond grateful and encouraged. And, some of the tools you even just describing, we've of course experienced. And I'd been a fan of the work and had been working a lot of the tools with our church for years and years, that little accountability exercise and an offside around like, let's write everybody's name and what
Give
can we
each other
count
feedback.
on. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. And you do that the first time with your team. I mean, people look like they want to throw up on the table,
Right.
But I can give testimony to the fact that you can do that in a way that becomes a natural behavior. It's not like this, oh no, we went to the dentist, we got a root canal. This is healthy and helpful. But I agree with you. I think our resistances to that kind of work is pretty regular. Oh, my dog's barking. Sorry.
I know.
But yeah, I'm really, really grateful. So if you get one chance to say something now to all the pastors of the Vineyard, this is how we finish. What would you want to tell pastors in the Vineyard? Like, hey, listen to me. Here's something I want you to think about. Here's something I want you to pay attention to. Here's something I want you to hear from me. What would you want to say?
What immediately comes to my heart is God's original assessment of man in the garden after he intimately formed him, called him, made him. He said, it's not good that man's alone. And then made the first team, which was his spouse, Eve. And I think there's a lot of pastors listening right now who have staff, but a staff is not a team. And there's many who are alone, and they know that. And I have a tremendous empathy. I would want to say it's time to find 2 or 3 other people. And I feel led to say, not outside of, in addition to your spouse, if your spouse is involved, 2 or 3 or 4 other people who will co-lead with you as a peer, which is hard for many pastors because there's this weird spiritual authority. But I just want to say, all bad things I've seen in churches, if I could boil it down, it's because the pastor did not have a real team that would either tell him the truth or tell each other the truth. And either a good pastor was dealing with lies that they didn't know existed until it was too late, or a bad pastor was not being confronted about things and sin was not being dealt with soon enough. And so for the sake of the church, build a team, a real one where everybody will just tell each other the real, hard, honest, humble truth.
Yeah. Well, imagine a world where someday you go to a seminar and you can ask the room, what's the healthiest organization you think that exists in the world? And that the chorus comes back, the church. I mean, we don't know how they're doing that, but there's something about the way they work that's really healthy. Imagine a world where that could be true. That would be.
Oh, I feel like that's in the Bible somewhere, that like, how will they know that we're different?
It is in the Bible. It turns out it is also.
Oh, is it? It's in the Bible?
It is.
Ministry days are so old. You're the professional pastor. I am now just a meager, secular, atheistic consultant.
So funny. You are such a joker. No, and Chris, I couldn't agree with you more. I just really couldn't agree with you more. And I really appreciate what you had said about, the warfare component. That's real. The fact we need teams, that's real. And I just find so many pastors, they got into this because they like the Bible, or they love caring for people, or they can teach pretty well, or whatever. But this kind of skill, aptitude of leading teams, they kind of find themselves just in, like, oh, wait a minute, like, I guess I did enough. I led enough people to Christ, so we've got like 100 people standing around. Or I taught the Bible well enough, we got 100 people standing around. And I think I'm supposed to like hire people and like do things. I don't really quite know how to do that. I don't, And you're right. The sort of off-the-shelf solution is hire an executive. Get somebody who knows how to do that. But the truth is, this is something we all have to grow in and learn. And most pastors I know didn't get into this to do that. They got into it for some other reason. And whereas I think most CEOs even know, no, that's what I do. I lead teams that get things done. I don't know that most pastors thought that's what they agreed to. So yeah, it's a good reminder. I'm so grateful for your work, the work of the Table Group, and it's helping me at a distance, helps everybody I know. It makes most pastors uncomfortable because they have to face things they'd rather ignore. But yeah, I'm really, really grateful for you, Chris, and your investment in our movement.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you've carried a big burden for this movement called the Vineyard. I get the privilege of hearing your heart behind the scenes when nobody's looking, and you have courageously shouldered a lot. And for the sake of the church, I just want to say to you, thank you for your sacrifices. It's been great. It's been many great sacrifices, I know. And it's an inspiration to see how the Lord has used you.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it. Well, as much as you'll let me bother you to help, I'll just keep bothering you. And maybe we could even get another conversation like this. I would really love that.
Love it.
All right.
Thanks, Jay.
Dude.
Thanks.
The We Are Vineyard podcast is a production from the team at Vineyard USA. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here are a few ways you can help us. Leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Connect with us online for additional resources. Our website is vineyardusa.org, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Vineyard USA. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.